You can all see the slides now.
Looks good.
That's great. Thank you again. As friends, as Vivek mentioned, till recently, a few weeks ago, I was serving as the senior VP for Vice President for UPMC, overseeing health innovation for UPMC, and an academic chair and a senior hospital administrator. And prior to that, I was at UCLA in similar roles. More recently, as I thought about what I can, where I can make impact in healthcare, and the opportunity arose to become a general partner in a health venture firm called Healthcare Capital, and I spend most of my time there. But I still do actually have my faculty appointments, as you can see, and advising other health systems. I appreciate everybody's questions and concerns around NIH funding, especially what's happening today. And we've been fortunate, my group and I, in being able to, over the years, successfully secure NIH funding. Most of my research is in building new technologies or applying technologies in biosensors, AI, machine learning methods to creating clinical solutions. I've also partnered with industry on SBIR and STTR grants, which have, as I'll share with you, have served as a mechanism to continue supporting the technology development for commercialization, providing an alternative source of not funding as opposed to venture funding. Over the years, I've been able to found a few companies, and also in my most recent role overseeing health innovation for UPMC enterprises, have been involved in early stage, growth stage, co-creating, co-developing, and growing several ventures, which I'll share with you. Just to put things in context, why innovation matters for academic medical centers, it is an extension of their tripartite mission, which is clinical care, research, education, advancing high quality products and services that benefits patients and society. So it's definitely should be an extension of completing and rounding up those core missions over here. And then, the next natural step for expanding the use of things that have been beneficial to your health system is to actually share it to the world. Now, of course, the other clear benefits of that is diversifying the health institutions or companies' revenues with that commercialization. But this is also an area where there's been a biggest challenge for health system is translating their research into products or services. And we'll talk about a bit of where those barriers exist and how to overcome them. More and more health systems are undertaking care delivery innovations. They're redesigning clinical processes and care delivery models themselves, both to tackle inefficiencies and expand on improving clinical care. And many of these are being translated now into what used to be in the past just clinical innovation projects or healthcare quality improvement projects to actually building new companies around those. And most importantly, and frequently unstated, is that if academic health systems don't engage in innovation, they will not stay relevant. There is a fair amount of growth in healthcare that's occurring in non-traditional non-traditional healthcare entities, as all of you are aware. And academic health systems need to modernize and be a part of that particular ecosystem. And that goes towards to some of the questions that you were asking about NIH funding and research from a mechanistic and a translational standpoint. How do you actually bring that to benefit the greater society, as well as being able to commercialize and be an asset for the health system. So the reason the academic health systems can excel at innovation and commercialization are listed over here. Most of the top institutions and many others have an integrated research and clinical environment. They do actually have what others don't have, which is access to a diverse patient cohort, as well as data with real world insights that most industries actually clamoring for, pharma, medtech, everybody. And then they have, of course, amongst the faculty and the clinical staff and the administrators, a multidisciplinary expertise, and the top institutions have built a collaborative culture. There's certainly some have more robust funding streams and industry partnerships, and others are moving towards that. And then finally, of course, many of the institutions are thinking this way. They've developed incubators and technology transfer offices. Some work better than the others, but inherently there are challenges. Health systems or academic health systems generally focus on their core missions, which is clinical education research. Innovation and commercialization takes a backseat, and it shouldn't, but it does even today. And there are other systemic barriers which are listed here, and I'll go over how they've impacted and how where I failed or my groups failed, and where we've actually been able to successful, having learned from those. So just to share with Vivek and I were talking how to be able to best communicate the key pertinent messages along with my journey and transitions and why it occurred. I just lay out, my course of my career, starting with my internship to where I am today. Started in '93, my internship at a Johns Hopkins Hospital, transferred to UCLA, where I actually did my residency and fellowship in anesthesiology and cardiac anesthesiology, echocardiography. And then, fate and serendipity and good mentors like Vivek actually guided me towards seeking, more scientific discovery, and enrolled in a STAR program at UCLA, which is accomplishing a PhD in biophysics physiology. And therein had a fairly informative and satisfying career at UCLA as an assistant professor and associate, rising through ranks as a professor and a chair. And then did as I got more involved in innovation and leadership, did an MBA and seeking greater opportunities and understanding about innovation and healthcare. Insurance in the United States, took on a larger role at University of Pittsburgh and UPMC, where I also served as the senior vice president overseeing innovation. And then, again, trying to explore where I can have impact in today's world, also became a partner in Healthcare Capital. So through this, my training, I prepared my training to help me with these roles. But mind you, the need was of what I needed was not synchronous with where, when, and how I trained. So that's again part of it is a limited structured mentorship program that existed and that exists in most academic health systems. And while this is probably one of the most important aspects of your careers, especially early on, and you will need mentorship throughout your career, you have to seek those out. And I was fortunate in having great mentors like Vivek and others who guided me through this. But I did engage in training, initially in clinical medicine, and then research, and then innovation, and then management studies and commercialization and investment over my career to complement my practices. So where it started really was initially my interest in exploring innovation and commercialization, even before I understood what those were. I was a cardiac anesthesiologist, fairly busy in one of the largest, actually the largest heart transplant centers in the country, and being on call day and night. really managing these patients with severe pulmonary hypertension. Many of them failed being an optimal candidate for a heart transplant, uh, primarily because of having what was presumed to be a fixed severe pulmonary hypertension. And at that time, there was no selective pulmonary vasodilator. I was aware of this particular research, which was being done at Mass General Hospital by one of the anesthesiologists on inhaled nitric oxide as being potentially being a pulmonary vasodilator. And the drug was not approved at that time. This was late 1999 and 2000. It was an orphan drug. And with my colleague and mentor, at that time she was the chief of cardiac anesthesiology, worked to get an FDA IND to study this drug and engage in a clinical trial. At that particular time, given that there was no delivery system that was available, I worked in collaboration with one of the respiratory therapists in the cardiac surgical ICU, and I developed a delivery system that allowed us to give inhaled nitric oxide. This is very early on, um, to non-invasively, and especially for patients who were spontaneously breathing. We published this paper. It showed that nitric oxide could be used as a test drug to demonstrate reversibility of pulmonary hypertension in these patients and increase the number of patients who could be transplanted. Um, and at that particular time, again, having no real knowledge about a need for commercialization or protecting intellectual property, didn't do that. We're just happy that we got the paper published and we're able to help patients. Um, Sure, around at that time, really at that time, and this was the serendipity part of this, Lou Ignarro had received the Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide and its properties in vasorelaxation. And of course, he was from UCLA, and he finding out how his greatest discovery was impacting humankind. He reached out to UCLA clinical staff, faculty, uh, who were actually working with this. And so that led to a series of discussions with me and him, between me and him, which was again part of the early mentorship, and him essentially telling me that you have too many questions and you need to get some more advanced basic science training to be able to answer them. And he would be happy to serve as my PI and mentor for my PhD. And of course, in the series of conversations, he also shared with me how much he was traveling and he was lecturing. So I said, that's a great idea. I will, but of course, I will do it in a field that I'm interested in. And I chose to, work with Jim Wise, who was chief of cardiologist and another brilliant researcher in cardiac electrophysiology, um, choosing to study sudden cardiac death and what were the biophysical electrical mechanisms that contributed to sudden cardiac death. Um, uh, and we created, over my career, um, a total of maybe around 150 or so research papers in this particular field, with some of our work also becoming part of national guidelines, um, of research, the laboratory research being supported by NIH. We focus a lot more on, as many of these grants are on mechanisms, even though the desire was to actually develop therapies and commercialize them. The therapies part we did develop, but we never really could get to the point of commercialization, given the fair amount of funding that is involved in neuromodulation, and there weren't great mechanisms to support that. So long and short of my laboratory research career, which was great in terms of career development and certainly was instrumental in me um, uh, being appointed as chairs and academic leaders. across societies and getting supported by the NIH, but was not as much um, impactful in terms of being able to create novel therapies that can be used for society. Maybe perhaps someday some of my other junior faculty would be carrying this work. So when I look back and try to understand, what were the attributes that one gets trained as a physician scientist or an investigator versus an innovator, there's certain several ones that are overlapping. However, there's a gap that exists in training that is needed for innovators, which are listed over here. Um, you certainly get greater knowledge about entrepreneurship through workshops, business education, regulatory IP, legal compliance, understanding of finance, investments, fundraising, tech transfer offices, and mentorship and networking programs that can benefit growing innovation and commercialization. And those certainly were lacking, and I had engaged in several of other programs to fulfill those gaps that exist. As the chair of anesthesiology at UCLA, and being able to take opportunities that were timely as I thought at that moment, UCLA was implementing Epic. This was early on in the implementation process across the country, and we saw an opportunity in using digital health innovations to improve patient care as well as transform care delivery. So we were the first, if not one of the first, to build actually a systematic approach. We created a data warehouse for the surgical services, and it allowed us to derive insights from EMRs, which everybody assumed would be natural, but that doesn't necessarily happen. Um, and we were able to use data insights and built a fairly uh, fairly comprehensive analytics platforms at UCLA to guide clinical decision making within the health system, improve our coding, improve operations, reimbursements. The platform allowed uh, many of the practices to be scaled and allowed a much more democratized end user access. Um, we had engaged in this development in 2014, but the final commercialization occurred, much later in 2021. For a variety of reasons, I transitioned out from my role at UCLA into UPMC. My mentees who and junior faculty who took on this role, they got engaged in their academic lives. So academic life took precedence for a variety of reasons. There were concerns about, which aspects of what we had built were part of operations and integrated within the health systems structure versus what were actually commercializable intellectual property of our faculty. And all that took time with the delays in institutional licensing. And um, my junior faculty also undertook a training in innovation and commercialization through joining the Startup in a Box platform, which incredibly helped them. We were able to eventually license this thing to other health systems, and they actually published on this. And kudos to our mentees. They actually created a startup, which is still active today. Um, um, Delayed, but certainly was brought to life and completed the full cycle as it should have. I went on to create another startup in the digital biosensor world to manage heart failure. And this is where I collaborated with one of our faculty, senior faculty in School of Bioengineering, School of Engineering and Computer Sciences, to create a real-time, non-invasive, AI-driven sensor technology. We used, as many have, and a good model to do the research within the academic health system to de-risk this. Uh, uh, at that moment, instead of seeking out NIH initially, we chose to engage VC funding that allowed us to build clinical trials and seek FDA clearance. Over the years, this technology we took to other institutions as well, and right now we are in a pivotal trial for getting FDA clearance with the FDA. Along the road, we also applied for NIH STTR, Small Business Grant, which is actually, as I mentioned, a fairly good mechanism to support your technology development, especially in healthcare tech space. It gives you anywhere from $2 to $3 million, which you can use over a period of a couple of years. So that's a construct which many have used. This was recently published by one of my friends at University of Pittsburgh, whereby the PIs can develop software and algorithms using the university health systems ecosystem and de-risk the technology. Once it gets to that point, be able to get early investments from angels, um, uh, iterate on it, make it create the right MVPs and products that can engage larger capital venture investments. And all of these, the presumption is the health systems and the academic medical centers have an ecosystem and a platform that can support this bidirectional engagement with outside entities. And many do's and many are actually developing that. Um, Again, programs that actually have structured mentorship and platforms to allow this to happen seamlessly have done well, as opposed to the others that have created structures but don't necessarily have those actively used bridges. So some insights when it comes to faculty who are working and wanting to become innovators and engage in commercialization. From my experience and others, one thing is to integrate innovation into career pathways, and I think few academic health systems have already engaged in that process where innovation is considered for active promotions, and University of Pittsburgh is one, Stanford others, and several others do undertake that as compared to just traditional academic missions in clinical care and research productivity and education and training. I think recognizing the faculty that engage in these roles through creating formal roles and tracks is beneficial. Mentorship, as I shared before, is critical, and pairing the junior faculty with experienced physician innovators will certainly accelerate change and adoption, and certainly not um, lead to wasted time and effort, which occurred in many of our careers. Exposure to innovation processes, whether it's through rotations in venture arms, attending hackathons, or dual degree programs or other courses, any education and training that you can achieve. And during this process, you're building collaborations and learning from others will all actually help you get better informed towards this process. Institutions that simplify collaboration processes have also gained greater success. One thing that is needed is to streamline conflict of interest and tech transfer policies. Many institutions recognize this, and many institutions are working to simplify those processes that exist. There's always a balance between in managing bias and conflict, the legal concerns versus how much we can help the innovation occur. But having clear guidelines that allow clinicians to test their innovations at their own institutions, of course, with oversight goes a long way, and many institutions don't do that, and some do. Faster agreements for licensing IP to startup, and I know subsequent speakers are going to speak a lot more on this thing, so I'll defer to them. Cross-sector partnerships, collaboration is key. I've benefited tremendously throughout my career with partnerships with other departments, other schools, reaching out to industry throughout my career. And I certainly encourage each one of you to do that. And I think from an institutional standpoint, normalizing these industry collaborations and demystifying this and reducing the stigma around business and medicine is important, especially now as we've discussed. We talked about training in entrepreneurship, which is essential, and certainly making sure that yes, if mechanistic research is important, but if you are trying to achieve innovation and commercialization, which is more shorter term goal, always tying the innovation back to patient outcomes, what's most important to the stakeholders. Physicians do know the clinical delivery challenges and have the solutions to this, incorporating patient feedback in their design and focusing on value to patients and provider leads to robust innovation and sustainable commercialization. In other words, technology for technology's sake is great, but it may actually not get adopted or scaled up and supported by health systems and venture groups. So as I transition from UCLA to UPMC, taking on senior executive roles, um, a great it was a great opportunity for me being part of one of the largest, if not the largest, integrated academic health systems in the country, with 43 hospitals now and a health plan, um, and a innovation investment arm with about $2 billion in its fund, with hospitals in Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, and several hospitals internationally. Tremendous ecosystem to innovate, very progressive, and a great learning experience for me and many others. Just to give a background, it's almost a $30 billion system, has 100,000 employees, one of the largest private non-governmental employer in Pennsylvania, more than 4 million patients lives that it covers through its insurance plan, and fairly large in terms of its footprint across the state of Pennsylvania. So again, in part because of my executive positions, both as a mandate as well as a desire, I focus a lot on translating clinical practice innovations into commercializations. And as I shared, I've always involved in research, and NIH served as a great supporter of the work that we have done. So I am supremely thankful for that particular line of work that NIH supports. Um, but my focus became more and more about how do we actually bring about commercialization so that we can scale up these innovations to the real world and to the greatest healthcare society. Given that both as my background as well as a need for the health system, many of you know surgical care is responsible for more than half the health system's cost and also responsible for its margin. And there's certainly an unmet need that exists in perioperative surgical patients. If you were to consider all the complications, mortality that exists after surgery, that actually accounts to almost about the third highest cause of death in the United States and the world, behind heart diseases and all cancers combined. And sadly so, the complication rate and mortality it remains high, hasn't really changed much at all in the last several decades. And when we look at where these challenges come from, it's in a large part it's because the peri-op journey is very complex. It's impersonal. It doesn't involve patients in their own in care. It's segmented. It's not very coordinated, and it's many cases. Even though we try our best, it's not evidence based, and does not focus a lot on coordinating improvement in outcomes across multiple different specialties. And this is in spite of a large body of evidence that supports how the surgical optimization can occur and what are the drivers of reducing costs and improving these particular outcomes. So I set about creating a, a perioperative redesign program, and we set up several um, brick and mortar centers for perioperative care within the UPMC health systems, which involved multiple stakeholders, multiple disciplines across medicine to create a very coordinated care delivery model. That also served to advance value-based care. Given that we were a payer provider, it helped actually we followed outcomes for these patients, 2 years out. So um, while the outcomes were improved and the cost of care was actually reduced, this was still an expensive model, uh, not just in terms of cost, but also it does require having individuals from multiple different specialties who would be trained in this particular model. One of the key innovations we did, which many of you know, is to implement at scale enhanced recovery after surgery, which again, in brief, is again is a multidisciplinary approach implementing many different individual pathways across perioperative medicine, anesthesiology, surgical care, nursing care, uh, and creating a much more cohesive and coordinated approach for patient surgery. Research in this has been done over the past decade plus across multiple institutions across many continents, as has shown that patients that engage in a comprehensive enhanced recovery clinical pathways improve outcomes. The challenge was to being able to accomplish this thing at a lower cost and across hospitals that are not just tertiary coronary care hospitals, but also community hospitals and rural hospitals that existed in our system. And UPMC serves almost as a model for U.S. healthcare with hospitals that are in different classes of care delivery. So we ended up creating digital pathways embedded within the EMR that guided clinicians to achieve those particular goals and accomplish those, and we track those goals. And we implemented this as a pilot across 8 hospitals. Um, and one of the key partnerships which allowed us to be successful was engaging with a digital health startup, and we co-developed a technology for being able to in real time follow where these interventions being accomplished in any hospital, in any of these hospitals, which clinician, which clinical team was accomplishing that particular goal. If antibiotics needed to be administered at a certain time, were they being done or not? If a Foley catheter needed to be removed, was that being accomplished? Or if any other care delivery paradigm that we had developed as a evidence-based practice was being accomplished or not. So it was a fairly highly at that time technologically uh, a relevant process which this company had been developing with us as partners. So it was a co-development model with in-part funding from UPMC and from external investors, which allowed us to be successful. And individual insights allowed us to gain more systemic insights of the success of this program. And we were able to publish results in 10,000 patients, showed that we were able to improve not just short-term mortality, but long-term mortality and other metrics that are important to hospitals and to patients as well. In order to support this, we actually reached out to one of the clinical foundations. There are many that exist today, which many are not aware of. In this case, it was Beckwith Institute. Many of these patient care foundations will support clinical innovation, technology development as well, and I would encourage you to reach out to them. This particular program now is also being supported by the NIH. And I think one of the challenges here was that we failed to implement this approach at scale. While yes, 10,000 patients is not small, the the uh, the goal for us was to be able to implement this for 300,000 patients that we take care of every year across the 43 hospitals, and then be able to scale it up nationally. And I think this is a challenge where I see, the pilotitis problem, where academic health systems often launch into numerous small programs, and for a variety of reasons, um, um, and few of them reach full-scale implementation because of certain barriers. And these include risk aversion, which is accomplished to rely as a risk mitigation strategy. So you do small pilots, but when you're doing too many of them, you risk not actually having them scale up and be always in that perpetual piloting mode. One of the challenges I've seen is that every stakeholder, and they need to be all stakeholders being engaged, but each stakeholders can have a veto power, and that slows decision making and can kill an innovation project. In our particular case, this company, for other reasons, their sales cycle not matching with universities, as also not having enough of an investment funding to be able to continue work at scale with us, um, was a challenge. And actually, this company went out of business. And that is a challenge which exists with partnering with newcos and early startups that are not fully funded for a large health system. So while they can move nimbly, but if they're not fully have the resources to partner with large organizations will be somewhat skeptical in partnering with them. And finally, um, the ROIs have to be fairly clear in terms of making sure your hospital leadership and the chief financial officers can understand that these innovation projects, when they're scaled up, can actually be beneficial to an entire organization. Continuing on our journey, one of the other challenges we wanted to address was to assess and modify risk for these patients before they go into surgery. And this has been a holy grail, but we do understand that 20% of the patients that are having surgery have modifiable risk factors, and we can certainly work on them. And there have been several models that have been developed in the past by different organizations as well as individual. The most commonly one and the reference model has been made by the American College of Surgeons, the ACS NSQIP model, and several other institutions have also attempted to do so. Our goal in terms of creating large-scale innovation, which could be commercialized, was to use only preoperative variables, including social determinants of health. The goal here being that we should be able to identify patients at risk even prior to surgery. It should be done at the time of decision for surgery and not on the day of surgery. Scalable, that could be applied across the system and should be automated. So, of course, clearly implementing AI tools into decision making, and of course, it should be accurate, reliable, and robust to be used for um, not just academic tertiary care hospitals, but also be applicable for community and rural practices as well. We published this research recently, created a machine learning model that was fairly robust, and we actually showed it was better, at least for our patients in the state of Pennsylvania, was better than the American College of Surgeons NSQIP model, which in itself is pretty good. And beyond an academic exercise, we actually implemented this thing at scale, and at this learning from past experiences, besides getting multi-stakeholder engagement, we had a top-down implementation as an institutional priority and implemented this thing across all our hospital systems. So at any given point, any surgeon, any surgical office staff, any nurse can go into the system and identify which patients are at high risk, with whom are at moderate risk, and for what, and be able to engineer clinical teams and pathways to take care of those patients, allocating the right resources in a timely manner. And as you can see, initiatives like this can be only successful if all the teams, multiple teams are involved, but not just the teams. We have to get buy-in from the health systems leadership as well to make this change acceptable, adopted, and be scalable in a sustained manner. Now, next goal really was our commercialization. In this particular case, we chose a strategy of partnering with a venture studio, and this was Redesign Health. Redesign Health is a venture studio based out of New York. And while we were investors in the studio, they had reached out to me. They had done their independent research on care gaps that exist in surgical care, and of course, having published and being one of the so-called opinion leaders in this field, that reached out to me, and their independent research and market surveys combined with ours, we felt that co-creating a company, a digital health company, was the right approach rather than us leading it or them leading it by themselves. Um, and that led to a much more successful model for early commercialization of our brick and mortar practice, and that was the a way for us to scale it up and bring it to other institutions, and the company continues to do well. The PIP Care, as it's called, it provides innovative solutions for optimal surgical outcomes and includes virtual health, digital platforms, as well as uh, including a personalized approach uh, with health coaches and nurses to provide evidence-based care, uh, which currently gets accomplished in an expensive model in hospital settings with physicians, and not that physicians are not part of this group, but we certainly were able to adapt to a lower cost clinical care delivery model. We secured some NIH seed funding as well, even though this was a totally venture-backed operation. And we published in this and showed that the what we were proposing this platform be able to do was certainly able to improve to achieve in terms of improving surgical outcomes and improve and as well as enhancing patient experience with a great net promoter score. There are certain many other groups that have engaged in a similar model of innovation to commercialization, translating innovation to commercialization. Um, Other venture groups like Aegis have created a Aegis digital consortium, and I was also helpful. I was able to engage our health system in becoming a partner in this digital consortium. A similar model where the Aegis Venture Group, who has the expertise, the business knowledge, as well as the capital to partner with individual hospitals finding innovative solutions to healthcare's biggest problems. Now, these solutions can be built as companies with individual health systems, with others as partners, with a shared revenue seeking equity arrangement that is geared towards benefiting the health systems. So still early, but a attractive model which we've been partnering with the group. I just want to share with you that there are some systemic barriers that do exist. We did talk about how the barriers exist for individual clinicians, physicians, and with regards to their training as well as their role in the academic health system. But there are systemic barriers that exist to commercialization in academic health systems, and again, some opportunity for us to improve that. There is certainly a risk aversion culture that exists in healthcare, and some for good reasons. Healthcare is highly regulated, um, and that leads to a conservative culture that exists in many of these institutions. With the responses that you would hear new solutions that this will never work, which generally has an effect of chilling the innovation. Unlike tech industry, healthcare lacks a culture of celebrating failure as learning, but more and more institutions are adopting and assimilating that in their innovation and clinical quality improvement workshops. Leadership support is incredibly important, especially early on in developing innovation and commercialization. There would be failures, and executive champions are essential for this, and they can provide the air cover for experimentation that needs to occur in that early time period. Many health systems have created uh, these innovation labs, and some of them are impactful. Many of them I feel are for show, um, and they're good talking points and good for publicity, but haven't really realized the promise that they should have been. Frequently, that occurs if these innovation programs they're not aligned with the core clinical mission or strategy, and if they do so, if they're not aligned with that, they will lack real traction. When initiatives aren't integrated with the hospital need, you're likely to end up with a demo rather than actually a deployed solution. And then certainly you want to make sure that teams that are creating the innovation, they're not homogenous. Yes, you want to have multiple stakeholders from all different disciplines, as well as including outsiders. And that creates a healthy tension and challenges the status quo thinking. Other concerns that exist over here are some of the regulatory constraints. FDA, CMS, HIPAA compliance, especially now in the health tech space, is really around security issues, and for good reasons. But it does create a slowing. It does create a slowness in development and adoption of technology. In the healthcare space, there's certainly concerns about not wanting to experiment at the front lines, and but that does make it hard to iterate quickly on new ideas compared to other less regulated industries. Even when you have a great technology, you still have to work with the payers to develop a reimbursement model and codes if they don't already exist. And so before you embark on building a technology, make sure that you've actually um, have an understanding of that. And there's several reimbursement groups that exist who can provide that information and knowledge, share that knowledge with you. It is important to make sure that the ROIs are fairly clear and objective, and that certainly helps with the financial officer of the hospital to understand the value of the innovation as also to adopt them, given that their focus is in their quality. Yes, it focuses on their improving quality and outcomes, but they're also looking at short-term, quarterly financial metrics as well. So clearly, building on innovation and commercialization or adopting commercialization that can impact patient care has to come in with very clear, definable ROIs. Needless to say, innovation projects and innovation funds that health institutions have created should be adequately funded. The ones that have been successful have been funded either through balance sheets or other philanthropic funds to the tune of millions of dollars, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, as compared to the more modest ones, which haven't been as successful. And as we've been discussing, government policies certainly impact, especially in the field of AI. As you're seeing, policies are still evolving and how it needs to be done, and they will inform and reshape some of how the technology is developed. The traditional metrics that exist for innovation and success in this healthcare space, some listed over here. I'm sure you'll hear more about this in the subsequent lecture. Um, Health systems have created incubators and accelerators, some more successful, and they have their processes that exist. Each one of those, the one that we built with UPMC Enterprises, which was our innovation arm, was supporting both translational sciences and digital solutions. And we were successful in part because we brought in clinicians, scientists, preclinical, clinical research experts, entrepreneurs, venture cap professionals, software engineers, data scientists, and product managers, design thinkers, all as part of one group. So it was a large group, so we could provide the knowledge and the information that was needed to our customers, as well as our co-developers and collaborators and our portfolio companies, along with the capital. As you can see, venture development has multiple different components, and institutions that have done this well, they've addressed each and every component, and there's a person or a task or a process that's assigned to these in order to be accomplished at the right time. And this was the secret of our success in being able to create through a much staged and structured approach on vetting and supporting many of our portfolio companies. Four-stage process that allowed us to accept these companies and these ideas within our ecosystem and translate them into commercial successes. This gives a listing of the 46 portfolio companies that we are currently supporting, many of them supported from outside and several built from within the UPMC ecosystem. A fairly comprehensive suite of technology services that our engineers and scientists and data analytics provide here. And the importance of this thing is that for many of you who are seeking out to build this thing yourselves or think that these need to be only done through vendor arrangement outside, you could reach out to many of these innovation funds like this, and other institutions might have similar of those, which and it also encourages partnerships and you also and their interest in your particular work if it reaches a commercialization stage, and they can support that. Of course, data has power, and industry, pharma, medtech, everybody wants data in a meaningful format, and we've created a platform called Ahavi that allows us to build that partnership, also serve as an ecosystem to develop AI models and test them and validate them with real-world evidence. Well, finally, just in the last couple of minutes, as I built my career, opportunity arose for me to become a partner with a venture group, and I think you will be hearing from my partner Amir Rubin in the next couple of weeks, talk about our thesis and work. At Healthier Capital, we do seek to advance healthy outcomes for all. We partner with technology-powered healthcare innovators to advance healthy outcomes for all, and that's been our focus for our venture group, which includes 4 general partners that are here, each coming from healthcare field. Between us, we do represent consumer-facing organizations, payer organizations, other technology development firms, as well as, in my case, with fairly diverse backgrounds in provider side as well as in healthcare innovation development and commercialization. This has been our thesis of the flywheel we use for not just helping our portfolio companies and our limited partners, but we actually actively engage with our health systems whom we advise, and we get advice from them. This in the long run helps us be able to partner in creating and developing the right technologies and right companies for them, as well as them sharing with us what's working, and us taking that information back to our companies. Overarching goal being that we deliver healthier outcomes to this entire ecosystem that is involved in improving patient care. Our thesis really goes towards recognizing that both the demand side and supply side in healthcare is suffering, and it's leading to excess cost, as well as poor outcomes amongst the patients, as well as amongst the providers, with increased burnouts and high costs of healthcare. And thus, we've invested in healthcare technologies that are focusing on improving consumer experience and improving access to healthcare. And these include companies like Ezra and Function, which are in direct to consumer, improving diagnostic and healthcare diagnostic services, improving administrative and clinical services through automation. A lot of waste goes towards that, and there are not enough people to do that. So companies like Hyro, we're invested in that help support that. Employing, building companies and delivering improved mental health care, is a big area of interest for us. And My Health and Octave are two uh, both tech delivered platform as well as complex mental health care, as well as creating solutions for data analytics and research, which is MetaLoop. That's again an investment area company for us. How do you connect with VCs? I've listed some key opportunities for you to reach out to VCs early in your career, besides the NIH, whom we focus a lot on. You leverage warm introductions, participate in accelerators and incubators, industry conferences. If you attend those and use the pitch events that exist to bring yourselves into visibility. There are lots of online platforms and databases that exist, which will match you up with the right VCs. Build a public thought leadership profile for yourself through publications, as well as being on many of these business websites, and invest in cultivating long-term relationships with even before you're raising. So these are opportunities for you to expand funding for your technologies and work. And then finally, I leave you with this message. It is not just about technology that matters. It's really about people and processes, even when you are trying to make sure that your health technology gets adopted. And delivering the right ROI for the health system is more important than just marketing your company. Choose thoughtful investors and other partners and collaborators. And Instead of famous brands, be able to choose nimble and fast-moving customers and partners. So I know I shared a lot with you, and we have a few minutes if you want to take some questions, but I'm happy to share these slides as well with you.
Aman, thank you very much. Let me lead by a key question is many of our scholars are outside traditional health systems. So what can they do to effectively connect, identify clinical partners who are open to kind of collaborations? And not just any partner. Most people in the health system, in the medical center, tend to be clinicians, but people who are like you, who are driven by innovation. Any suggestions?
So yes, I think if you are part of that same institution, then institutions tend to have on their websites, portals, information sharing of where those research are happening, centers of excellence. Many of the institutions have, besides the centers, they have CTSIs, which are engaged in not just research, but also innovation. The clinical offices of the health systems, quality departments, performance improvement have initiatives that are being launched that improve healthcare. What that allows you to know is who are the clinicians that are working in that particular field that you might have an interest in. Besides, of course, the obvious ones that you're reaching out to publish research and reaching out to those individuals. And I would say many of those individuals, when you reach out to them, they are fairly welcoming of at least having that first meeting with you, if not following it up as well. Um, Most of the ones that are engaged in improving innovation, they do see a value in collaboration, and they would welcome you in a much more constructive dialogue if you approach it by saying that I have a technology that's going to solve your problem. That may not be the best approach. It's more about you understanding what the problem is and saying, can you actually partner with them in improving their work or lives better?
Great. Thank you. I I want to give them all a Shruti, quick question. I want to give you all a well-deserved bio break. So Shruti will take one question from you.
Thank you, Aman, for the extensive experience you shared with us. So you talked a lot about pipelines, innovation pipelines that start in the clinic. So there's a problem, and then you solve that, you bring it to the market. So that's essentially that more often than not might become an enterprise solution. So in terms of direct to consumer solutions, could you give an example of or like multiple pathways that might be possible there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Direct to consumer work is more new in the traditional health systems. And traditional health systems generally have not been very successful in creating commercialized models for direct to consumer. And part of it is just the notion that patients need to come to them as opposed to them reaching out to the consumers. Traditional health systems have been structured that way. So there's a problem with that approach, which needs to be changed. And thus, the direct to consumer approach has been more successful in the private sector and the non-traditional health system. If you look at large direct to consumer models like One Medical or Oak Street, they're all come from non-traditional health systems. And that goes to my point that academic health systems need to evolve to actually accomplish that. Otherwise, they will not be relevant.